So, how do you empower great doers,
Yeah.
great thinkers
Yeah.
to be great speakers?
Rudimentary sense, right? It infers that you're telling people how to speak in
Yeah.
stories. 90% of the work is about understanding the stories that you believe.
So, what motivates you as a human being to get to the top 0.1%?
You believe in a story, and this story is what determines your performance. Because of the journey, you get to. It's like sushi. Not everybody likes it, but once you start liking it, you can't stop eating sushi.
Actually, now I realize why I lost the championship. I didn't know how to dance.
There you go,
So,
Saveen. There you go. That's the competitive advantage I had.
okay, good afternoon, Dan. Thank you for coming in to this creative conversations. Generally, I do these conversations with interesting people around the world, and it has been a dream to do this with you. So, thank you for being here.
Saveen, first of all, I'm flattered you find me interesting. And second of all, the pleasure's all mine.
Great. Uh, and I know a lot of you know Dan already, but for the few people who may not know Dananjaya Hettiarachchi, the world champion of public speaking 2014, he's been a coach, a mentor, and helping leaders across the world on how to be better and reach the top 1% or top 0.01% peak performance coaching. So I've had the privilege to work with Dan, and he's been a great mentor, a support, a great friend. Every time I hit a roadblock in my life, I pick up the phone and talk to you. So it's been great. So I want you to talk me through
Yeah.
what changed. It's been 10 years
Yeah.
since the World Championship of Public Speaking. We are in 2024. 2014 is when you did that. So how has the last decade been?
I think the last decade's been interesting, Saveen, because predominantly because of the type of stories that are changing. I think the stories that you and I grew up on to visualize our own future, right, are no longer valid. Some are still valid, but most of our old stories are invalid. And there's a new set of stories and narratives that are coming into cultures around the world, right? So my work, really revolves around these new stories and what these new stories are setting, because the value systems of the world are changing, ambitions of people are changing, and there is a constant search for a new set of stories. And leaders around the world need to now start telling these new stories because that's the philosophy on which the future generation of leaders will aspire to grow on. So it's been a lovely shift to see this dynamic and be a part of that journey. It's pretty good.
Absolutely. And this is something that you've told me a few years back that still stays with me,
Mm.
that what you speak on stage and the story you tell
Yeah.
is not to impress the audience,
Yeah.
but more to change your own mindset.
Yeah.
So stories shift your own mindset,
Yeah.
right? And I've seen that through your speaking across the world in different stages.
Yeah.
And I've also felt it myself when
Right.
I was going through that journey.
Mm.
And that is something that is incredible.
Yeah.
The world championship winning speech of yours,
Mm.
I see something in you.
Mm.
It's been a game changer. I think the highest watched
Yeah.
world championship speech on YouTube till date, 7.58 million views and so on.
Right.
And the beauty of it is, I still remember this, and I won't be quoting any names,
Sure.
but 2017 when I was in the finals,
Mm.
and all of us who lost the
Mm.
championship, there was this guy who was next to me, and he was angry.
Mm.
And I thought maybe he's angry because he lost the contest.
Mm.
And you won't believe what he said.
All right.
He said, I wish I lost to Dananjay.
Okay. Okay.
So he was not angry
Yeah.
that he lost the
Right.
contest,
Mm.
but he was like, I wish I lost to somebody who did so well.
Right.
You changed the game of what a world championship speech means
Yeah.
and what it stood for.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to you after the contest, and you told me that was not the speech that I
Mm.
gave for 7 minutes.
Mm.
It was 10 years of work that you put in.
Yeah.
So walk us through that 10
Yeah.
years of preparation for that one 7 minute speech.
Yeah.
That,
Uh,
yeah.
And that's an interesting take. I think if you split what you said into two parts, right, about how stories transform not only the audience but the storyteller, right? Stories, I always consider as the programming of the human mind. Right? So just how code programs a certain software, if you want to reprogram or deprogram your mind, it happens through stories. And if you look at history, people have done incredible things because of a story they believed, and then people have done disastrous things because of a story they believe. So inside all of us, human potential starts with the story that you believe in. And depending on who you are, the more times you tell it, it becomes a reality. And the more times you tell it to people, and if you articulate it in a correct way, they start to get programmed into it. And there are many examples of positive versions of this as well as negative versions of this. A story in itself, right, is just like a piece of code that gets inserted into your mind. And, it works depending on the conviction of the person that's telling the story. Now, coming into the latter part of your question on this journey, one of the things that really kind of baselined very early on in my life is what's the story that I believe in? And is this story universal enough?
Yeah.
Because to win a world championship of public speaking, or if you want to be a leader that influences masses, the story has to be universal. Now, for a story to be universal, it has to be a universal truth. Now, you can argue there's nothing called a universal truth, but if you take an era, let's take of 100 years, uh, there are some truths that are common across all cultures.
Yeah.
So, a great speech, a great piece of communication, a great piece of art, it doesn't necessarily have to be only speeches. It could be a piece of film, painting, photography, has to be based on a universal truth. And when it's a universal truth, right, it's easier for people to accept.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the filters that are there from our different cultures are bypassed and then it's internalized. So much of the journey of the 10 years was to find out, hey, what's that
My story.
universal truth? And very later on, after trying close to 1,000 speeches, towards the latter part of the contest, I found that, hey, actualizing human potential is one universal need that's there. So, what's the truth? The truth is that we don't know what we are capable of. That's the universal truth.
Yeah.
And something that supplements the need and the truth is that sometimes, more often than not, that capacity, that potential is unlocked through the people we associate. So if you ever find yourself struggling to figure out, who you are, what are you capable of, what can you do? And these are hard questions for an individual to answer. And more often than not, you can find the answers through the people that you associate. And that was the basis of the speech. Much of the work was done after the concept was found. And articulating the concept was basically the art of public speaking. But 90% of it is coming down to that universal need and that universal truth.
Yeah. And articulating it as I see something in you.
Yeah, and that's the speech
Yeah.
craft, right? So you can have the great idea,
Yeah.
you can have a great concept,
Yeah.
but then the real art in bringing it alive is the craft of
Yeah.
public speaking.
And that's the challenge that a lot of leaders go through today because the amount of depth and reflection needed for you to craft a story versus just articulating it.
Right.
That is the copy or the text that
Yeah.
you're talking about. So everybody wants a shortcut
Right.
to say, what can I say that'll impress people?
Yeah.
Versus what you're talking about is really going to the depth and saying, do I really want to say this? Do I mean it from the bottom of my heart?
It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's part of it. It's not about what I want, right? And I'll go back to what I told you before. It's about, hey, is what I'm trying to tell universal enough? Now, I might want to talk about a particular topic with a lot of conviction.
Yeah.
But if it's not a universal need, if it's not a universal truth, then your ability to influence the masses reduces. So a leader can have a passionate topic, but for it to resonate with the audience, it has to be a fundamental truth. And coming to the art of articulation, right? As much as it depends on reflection, it's also a byproduct of iterations. Any piece of art, let it be a speech or a piece of innovation, doesn't come only through reflection.
Yeah.
It comes from iteration. And you know
And-
this more than me,
yeah.
right? And where people struggle, right, is the level of iteration they're willing to commit.
Or the number of times you're willing to come.
And that's the level of iteration, right? So if you look at the greatest innovations in the world, have a level of iteration that's almost beyond human capability, right? 99% of the population won't iterate it to that level. But it's in that iteration, the nth level iteration, you find that final piece of art. And this is same to a speech, it's same to a design, it's same to a product that you're innovating in a company. It's the same thing in a story.
Yeah. I remember seeing that speech in its very raw form when you delivered it in the TED platform. It was 25, 30 minutes long speech, but I could see the essence there. 100%. And then what you delivered at Kuala Lumpur on stage was completely a different version of it, or like you said, the nth iteration of it with the rose in your hand and all of that. So, walk us through those iterations. How did that happen?
I think the iteration process is something that any expert needs to master. If you want to be a master in any field, right? It's not only in public speaking. It's about living with a solution, a half-baked solution, and then constantly iterating it until it comes to a standard that's world class, right? So much of the pain wasn't in the iteration part. It's just that you got to constantly fight your urge to put a full stop. Right? It's like, you design a flyer, right? And there's let's say you design a piece of material, right? Let's say, for example, like a poster, right? And, you have this urge to quickly put a full stop.
And say, I'm done.
Done. Right? But then, you also have this opportunity to not put a full stop, but continuously iterate it. Right? Now, how long do you have to iterate it for? And how much of incremental gain can you get from iteration? These are all products of your capability. So, when you start out, right, in speaking, you might iterate it 1,000 times and the quantum of difference may be very minimal. But then when you iterate it to the 1,001st time, you can see that quantum doesn't increase proportionally, it increases exponentially. And there's this sudden burst of quantum gain, right? That's disproportionate to your effort. So if you look at my journey and the iteration of the first version of my World Championship speech and the last version, for 1 year and 6 months, the gain was minimal. I cut a word, put a word, it's like, oh my God, it's just 2% better. But something amazing happened to us the last 2 months. Because of the momentum, the tweaks that I did in the last couple of months had a disproportionate gain. And I call this a quantum leap. Right? And you can find quantum leaps in many types of industries. And one of the examples that I love to give is this famous quotation by one of my friends, who's a very good process consultant in Sri Lanka. He said that a light bulb didn't come from iteratively innovating a candle. Right? You can improve a candle all you want, but you're not going to get a light bulb. There is this moment where a quantum leap happens from candle to light bulb, right? And that's what 0.1% know. Hey, I'm gonna put 10 years of work. I'm not gonna get the gain I want, but 10-year and first day, I'm gonna get that quantum leap.
We don't know when that quantum.
You don't know when the quantum leap comes, right? But they stick to it. Whereas many people, they get halfway, just put a full stop.
Wow. So, what do you recommend if somebody is aspiring to build something world class? That you keep iterating and somewhere down the line the quantum leap happens, or what's your strong recommendation?
Yeah, well, more often than not, right? I think greatness, right? You could be an entrepreneur, you could be a speaker, you could be in any profession. I always say this, right? That a greatness at the start of greatness is a vision misguided, right? Your initial start is never your ultimate goal. More often than not, the intention you start out something, let it be a company or whatever, is coming from a very misguided sense. But when you take the journey, you find the clarity, right? I never wanted to become a Toastmaster because I was going wanted to win the world championship or become a better communicator, right? I became a Toastmaster because, I was very bad at school and I just wanted to make my dad happy, right? Because he's the one who introduced me to Toastmasters in the hopes that it'll give me some philosophy in life. But it was not my intention.
Yeah.
So my intention was misguided. My vision of joining Toastmasters was misguided. All great things start with a misguided vision. But in the journey, and like it happened to me through the people that I met, you start course correcting, right? And you start building this philosophy. So step one, start, know that this is not the end. Step two, in the journey, build your philosophy.
That belongs to you.
That belongs to you.
Yeah.
So your philosophy is a set of rules and ethics that apply to you and define your success. You need this philosophy not before you become successful, but you need it after you become successful. And there are plenty of examples of people who have attained success without a philosophy having a very rapid fall in life, right? But people who have a philosophy and then scan opportunities with that philosophy after getting success can sustain it, right? So my recommendation, if you're starting out in anything, is these two things are important. Realize that where you start is not important. Iterations are important. And then use the journey to build a set of rules that guarantee your success. And that's my recommendation.
And these rules you find out through the journey. You don't start out
You
with
find out through the journey. Just look at me and you, right? You have a fantastic company. You're a great manager of people, and you relish the opportunity to scale organizations, and that's a rule for you. For me, I like to be an individual contributor. I work best alone, right? I'm more like a special ops guy, right? And I achieve things faster when I work alone. So both of us are going to success, but the rules are different. Right. And if I try to do something that you're doing, or you try to do something that I'm doing, it might not work out. So life is about discovering those set of rules that guarantee your success will sustain.
Irrespective of how big
Irrespective of how big you are, right? And a lot of people don't contemplate enough on, hey, here's my set of rules. And I'll evaluate the world and opportunities that are there from that set of rules. Right? And that assures that success is sustained.
I want to deep dive on your area of expertise that you've lived and demonstrated to the world, right? On storytelling. And what if there are leaders who have great ideas, and that's one of the reasons I started doing what I'm doing, right? I feel that great leaders need to be not just great speakers, they need to be great doers.
Right.
Just because they don't have the ability to speak does not mean they're not good leaders.
Yeah.
So how do you empower great doers, great thinkers to be great speakers as well?
Now, I'll answer that question, but I want to make a slight correction here, right? So when you say storytelling, it almost in a very rudimentary sense, right? It infers that you're telling people how to speak in stories, which is a very basic level understanding. And my work and the type of work that I do, maybe 10% of it is that. 90% of the work is about understanding the stories that you believe. So you may be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You may be a CEO of a boutique shop down the road. You believe in a story, and this story is what determines your performance. So you come back to what you're able to do in life is directly proportional to the story you believe. Right. So my job is about helping people reprogram those stories, because you can't. For example, take a company. You can't be a CEO with a manager's mindset. So what is a manager's mindset? A manager's mindset is the stories that you believe. So if you want to be an effective CEO, you got to change those stories. You got to unlearn those stories, right? And relearn the stories that'll help you become a better CEO. You can't be a husband with a boyfriend mentality, right? What's a boyfriend mentality, right? It's a set of stories. You got to change that set of stories and then have another set of stories that allow you to play a different role, right? So a lot of my work revolves around helping people unlearn, learn, and relearn the type of stories, internal programming that's needed to become successful in different parts of their life.
So can I say it's more story thinking and
Um,
changing rather
yeah,
than telling?
it's more kind of like internal change management, right? But
Yeah.
it's about what's the narrative. Because if you believe in a story, and to tell you that, hey, listen, what you believe is not the right thing for this level, it's a difficult thing to digest,
Yeah.
right? And change starts with fundamentally changing your internal story,
Yeah.
right? And this becomes more as you go into leadership, because you have your ego, right? And leaders with very strong personalities cling to those stories that they believe in, which may not be successful now. So going back to what you talked about, it's not about whether people are able to articulate stories, which
Yeah.
are important for leadership, but even for you to get results, you need to figure out whether the story you believe in works or not.
Yeah. So, what should they do as a leader to find what they believe in? Because that's a lot of thinking time and understanding.
It's not the type of work that I do, right? It's not necessarily preemptive,
Mm.
right? A lot of people that I work with come to me after facing disastrous consequences,
Mm.
right? So they've already experienced failure, right? And they don't know how to make sense of the failure. So the need to reprogram is already there. So my conversation or my work with a lot of these leaders is to help them see the fallacy in their own stories, and then start first believing a new set of stories and then start telling those stories,
Articulating.
right? So it's three stages.
Mm.
So though we fundamentally bucket all of this under storytelling,
Mm.
it's a very basic way of describing a very complex process of growth, right? At the growth of you, me, and every civilization is a story. And in India, you believe in the Mahabharata, right? In Sri Lanka, we have the Mahavangsha.
Mm.
All of these stories are cultures. Like, cultures are a set of rules and philosophies that society lives by. They are taught to their children by their parents and grandparents, and everything that you see around us has manifested from these stories.
Yeah.
And reprogramming that is a very challenging task, and which is the first task. Telling the story is the last part, which is the easier part to do.
Yeah. But I think the shortcut to telling it right versus crafting it for yourself and
Right.
changing it for yourself is the tougher part.
Yeah, changing it for yourself is the tougher part as a
Yeah.
leader. And then when you start doing things based on those new story assumptions, and then you have to change the culture of your organization, of your team, you
Mm.
do that by communication. Culture is not influenced by hard stuff. It's not influenced by infrastructure.
Yeah.
A culture is influenced by the stories you tell. So if you want your team to do better things, they all have to believe in a better story. And let's take some well-known examples of this. Like, let's take some very explicit examples, like Steve Jobs, right? Or even kind of Richard Branson. At the heart of their achievements, right? Jeff Bezos, is the story they're telling, and the people believing in that story drives the performance.
This is a different question, and this has been my personal observation as well.
Yeah.
That as time passes
Mm.
through,
Yeah.
and you've gotten so many opportunities to tell your story, be keynote speakers at large conferences.
Sure.
And one of the patterns that I've noticed is that are they really looking at learning, or are they looking at just being entertained by you and not really go back and reflect? And so, what has been your observation how the audiences have changed over the last few years? That they come to you with a question to improve their learning,
Mm.
or they come to you
Mm.
with the picture that they want to click with you, or
Yeah, I think my work kind of has two components, right? I think there's an entertainment value to it. I think there's a light-hearted part of it where you
yeah,
just go after listening to someone like me or any other speaker. You feel motivated. You got a slight spark in it, right? But the real but the real magic happens when you meet people that have a deep requirement. Deep requirements come through failure, right? And I think the most of the successful people that I've met have found me as opposed to me finding them, and they've come to me with a compelling reason that has stemmed from some form of failure. I don't like using the word failure, but in the absence of a better word, they've come to me through some sort of pain, right? So I think there are two components. Both sides are enjoyable in equal proportions.
And so, what motivates you as a human being to get to the top 1% or top 0.1% in general? So, if somebody is starting out new and whatever they want to do, how do you get there, or how do you start thinking about that level of refinement? Because it is really scary at times, and there's a lot of disbelief in yourself.
Yeah.
So, where do you start?
I think the start, right? There are two ways to start this journey, right? One is to model yourself under somebody who's at the proverbial top, right? It could be a father, it could be a CEO that you know. And when I use the term top 1%, it doesn't necessarily have to have a monetary aspect of it. You could, how do you become the top 1% of being a dad, right? Or being a top 1% of being a son, right? Or a daughter, right? So, I think you start by modeling, and modeling starts with association. And this is something a lot of people don't do, right? They don't associate successful people, and they don't know what that world is like. So step number one is to get exposure, right? And just like how I reached out to my idols, they are sometimes more than willing to spend time. And what I mean by top, again, in the lack of some better words, it doesn't mean global. You might have a great entrepreneur in your village, in your town, right? You might have a great professional, right? A great teacher who demonstrates the same qualities that the likes of a multi-billionaire would do around the world. And go associate that person. That's number one. Second thing, associate what it's not, right? I mean, experience what abject failure looks like. And this for me was a very strong motivator. I've seen people who are in powerful positions who are abject failures, and the consequences that happens because of that. And therefore, you get this urge to become the counter narrative. And what's the other type of a voice that can counterbalance this? So for you to get taken seriously, you got to become great. You got to come to the top 1% to influence your society. And if you want to have a counter narrative against what you don't like, right? And again, plenty of examples of this. So those are two ways you can start. Start by associating what you like to be like, or then go and experience what the abject failure looks like.
So that you're compelled to go the other way.
Absolutely. And you can even, like, when I say experience subject failure, it could be, you can be in the victim of that.
Yeah.
Right. You can be the victim of bureaucracy. You can be the victim of bad teaching. You can be the victim of, bad finance.
Yeah.
Being a victim gives you an opportunity to then turn the page, become the antithesis of it, and then become the best at it to change what you don't like.
Yeah, I think a lot of movie stories are written like this.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a Joseph Campbell articulated all of this. Like, it's like, you go to this call to adventure, right? And an adventure always starts either because there's a need, or you're the victim of something that you didn't want to be a part of.
And once you start, how do you keep up with that journey?
Yeah, and it's nice because I think, again, because of the cultural influences we've had through cinema, and more often than not than cinema, through books and so on and so forth, progress is generally defined as a linear trajectory, right? So you start, and then every
keep
other
going.
step is supposed to be
Upwards.
incrementally upwards.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that, right? And I think it's a very commonly talked about topic. And this is why I always say, uh, you have to constantly go back to zero. Constantly go back to zero. And you got to be comfortable going back to zero. But when you go back to zero and you take the next step, it's going to be a little bit bigger than the first step you took from zero.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you come to you go 1,000 meters and you come back to zero. The next step you take is going to be like 2,000 meters. Like the step is going to get bigger. So back to zero is a very theme that's close to my heart. Right. I like visiting zero often in my life. So it's not about how to keep up. Just accept and relish the part of going back to basics, back to your zero.
What if there's unwillingness to go back to zero
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you've achieved something and
Right, right. And
and
there's nothing wrong in that.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong in that. Look, I think it's important to understand that if you have a 9 to 5 job, right? If you're paying your bills, right, you got no drama in your life. You have no aspiration for greatness. You have no aspiration for abject failure also, right? You're in the right comfortable zone. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right? There's nothing wrong in that. Greatness is not something you choose. Neither is failure. But if you wake up one day in the morning and you realize, right, there's something missing in your life, there is a spark that you need to have, but it's not there.
Yeah.
That's the first sign that you're destined for something bigger. Because once you have that, you can't shut it out. People who are not meant to be in the 0.1% never have that. They're happy being average and they've got a balanced life. But you want to get to the top of your field, there is a lot of sacrifice. And just like failure is a sacrifice, greatness in your field is a sacrifice. It's a tough cost. Not many can bear
The other glass ceiling that
it.
sort of got broken when you were competing year on year is I could see that you were going every year and somebody from a particular region,
Yeah.
especially North America,
Yeah.
kept winning.
Yeah.
And the audience is from there.
Yeah.
And there was a moment of doubt that all of us had
Yeah.
as audience members that
Yeah.
will anybody from Asia
Right.
have
Southeast
Asia
Asia.
have the capability to win this at all?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did you gear yourself up to go back?
No,
to,
that's a good challenge because
Yeah.
English is not my first language. It's
Yeah.
not your first
Yeah.
language, right? It's something that we had to learn from scratch, then master it, and then champion it, right? But I think sometimes there's this thing called ignorance is bliss, and I was ignorant to a level that it didn't bother me. It bothered a lot of other people, but it didn't bother me because I knew I could do it. Like deep down, I knew. I just needed to figure out the how.
Yeah.
Right. So I think though that is I think it's a tremendous achievement in the fact that it opened up soon as I finished. Like, if you look at the 80-year history of the contest, it's America, America, America. You got Australia, then you got
Yeah,
UK,
UK.
and then you have Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Right. And then afterwards, it was Singapore, and India,
Middle East, yeah.
Malaysia, Middle East, and Qatar. And it really opened up a floodgate that said that, hey, here's something that was thought imaginarily impossible, but now it's possible.
Regular.
It's regular, right?
Yeah.
And breaking the glass ceiling was never the objective.
Yeah. It just happened.
It just happened. The objective was to create a piece of art that even when I listen to it, I go, holy crap, did I do this? Right? Like even today, when I look at I see something in your speech, I'm surprised. I did it. And that's the hallmark of a great piece of art.
Yeah.
The artist cannot replicate it again. The 1 and 1 has become a 3. There was a set of circumstances that led to it, and it can never be reproduced. Just like how Michelangelo can never paint another Mona Lisa, and Leonardo can never make another Mona Lisa, and how Michelangelo can never make another statue of David.
Yeah.
Right? And I have a beautiful video on my YouTube channel called "Times Make the Man" to articulate this even further. And for me, right, that's fulfilling because here is something that the creator himself cannot reproduce, but also in awe of. And
I remember you telling me this, that a lot of places you got called for after that. They would say, "Can you do this?"
Yeah, reproduce the same thing.
Yeah.
And my flat answer is no. Like it can never be
Yeah,
reproduced.
yeah, and that's really interesting because I know you telling me the story that you found the dustbin that was on stage
Yeah,
there in your
yeah,
room,
right, right,
and it was all by
right.
chance, and you
Yeah,
had
yeah,
to,
yeah. No, there is this thing, right? Like I think it happens to all great athletes, all great leaders. When you put in 10 years of work, Savin, um, sometimes circumstances bend in your favor, right? I don't want to get metaphysical or spiritual here because I'm generally not, but there is this X factor that comes into play when there is enough evidence that you've put in the effort, right?
and that's the uncontrollable, right?
What I'm saying is it's not what I'm saying is the opposite, right? I think it was Henry Ford who said that the human will is the most powerful tool there is because it can even bend nature in your favor.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that when you put in that effort, right, that murderous will,
Yeah.
sometimes circumstances bend in your favor. So for others, it's uncontrollable. But for those that have the will, you can bend it in your favor.
Okay, I want to take some questions from the audience as well. We can do that. Yeah, do you have any pre-speech rituals?
Pre-speech rituals.
Yeah.
And tremendously I do this. People find it fascinating when they discover this. I sleep a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I sleep a lot because I don't want to call it sleep in the traditional sense, but more of a meditative state where I keep replaying my performance or what I'm supposed to do because professionally I'm a speaker, right? I mentally visualize every aspect of it in detail, and I do this in a bit of a subconscious sleep state. So that's my pre-ritual.
So, do you do every word and
Every
every
word. I
position where
imagine
you
the
stand?
audience, the position, the smell, the sound, how I'm feeling, what my head feels like, what my gut feels like. And I do this in like a semi sleep state.
Wow, very interesting.
So one day, a friend of mine who was sharing a room at a conference, he was like shocked. Like he just woke up and did the speech. So he didn't know what was going inside in the mind.
Yeah. Uh, how do you deal with the pressure when you stand in front of the crowd? Because one thing is to get to the world championship, but after that, every time people are expecting magic to happen. So,
One of the things that when you talked about the journey, right, is you cultivate an appetite for things that usually scare people, and it happens in all professions.
yeah.
So I built this appetite um, to love that pressure. Like I love thousands of people looking at me. Like I spoke at the Rotary Convention, which was the largest audience I've spoken to, 30,000 people.
Yeah, in a
Right.
stadium, right?
In an aircraft hangar.
Yeah.
Right. Man, I was alive. Right. So because of the journey, you get to. It's like sushi. Not everybody likes it, but once you start liking it, you can't stop eating sushi. Same thing. When you go on a journey of excellence, you start to love the things that make you afraid.
Um, you said speaking came very naturally to
Yeah.
you. So, what was the challenge that you had to tackle in the journey?
The challenge is the how, right? Challenge is the how. Everybody assumes that the way they speak now is more than enough to be accepted at a world stage. And you see this in leadership across the world, Samir. You have your titles, yes, you have all of those stuff, great stuff, you've done everything. And then they think like, okay, look, the way I speak in a board meeting, the way I speak, at home should be enough for me to shine on any stage. This is fundamental error in assumption. For me, the challenge was also the same, right? I thought the way I talk was fantastic, nothing to change. I was wrong. So it took me 10 years to figure out the tone, the voice, combination of sentences that work in a global stage, timing, rhythm, that project your personality and charisma. So the how was the challenge.
And not,
Words came,
yeah, but not the how.
not the how.
And that's what got fine tuned a lot more.
In iterations, like we
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah, is it okay to know what is it okay to not know what you want to do? And also, is it okay to do something totally different than what you have studied?
100%. 100%. Right? 100%. Doing things that you have not particularly studied is a hallmark of very successful people. You want to start your career as broad as possible. So if you can do commerce with engineering, with philosophy, with design, you could do like make the pyramid broad, Savin. In Asia, we have this issue that we want to teach our kids only maths, only science. But through my job, I've had the privilege of associating, the 0.1% of the world, like the really successful people, like billionaires in dollar terms. They don't teach their kids mathematics and science, right? They send their kids to art school, right? Philosophy, culture, right? They're learning something very different from what we are learning in Southeast Asia, right? They're learning history, poetry. We are not, and I think you gotta have both worlds together. So if you're doing something very different from what you have studied, you're probably on the right track. So this is one.
That's a good measure.
That's a
Yeah.
very good measure of success, right? Because you're building lateral pillars of knowledge, right, as opposed to just one vertical pillar. And then to come back to your first, do you know what you want to do? This is not a static question, right? So if you ask me, Dananjay, what do you want to do now? I'd say I don't know, right? I'm doing what I'm good at, but what do you want to do now in this stage of your life? I don't know, but I love the journey to discover it. I'm in love with the process of discovering it, and I'm excited for that process, right? So I find comfort in the journey of figuring it out
Discovery. Yeah.
as opposed to the discomfort of not knowing.
Yeah.
And that's the shift that you need to make.
Fantastic. In the corporate world, just a lot of them work to pay their bills, but actually they don't really want to do what they really want to do. What do you say to them?
I'm going to give you a very realistic answer to this one, right? Once again, you got to work to pay your bills. You're never going to start off where you would love to start off. Like if you start with your dream job, you are probably in like the very, very slimmest of minorities, right?
Yeah.
And even if you get the dream job, you might not get a dream boss, right? Or a dream piece of work that you want to do. Everybody starts off left field. Just like I said, like every great vision starts from some sort of misguided concept. However, here's how it works. When, as Steve Jobs said, when you look back,
Is when the dots connect. Yeah.
you see the dots connect, right? I was a professional dancer for 4 years of my life, ballroom dancing, right? Might find it hard to believe now, but I had hair at one time. And I thought I was going to be the world champion of dancing. It's very simple. I started dancing at 17 years old. I was a gold medal dancer. And the first money that I made was from dancing for a wedding, like waltz dancing. I loved it. I was really good at it. Did I know what I wanted to do in the future at that time? No, I wanted to be a dancer, right? And did it pay the bills? It gave me pocket money. Then when I started Toastmasters, I realized that it was dancing that was giving me the confidence on stage, right? The body language came from dancing. The gestures came from dancing. So instead of dancing, I was just substituting it with speaking. Now, then when I went into becoming an HRD specialist in learning and development, I realized that, hey, holy cow, like, look, dancing is contributed to my speaking, and now my speaking is contributing to as a L&D practitioner. And then all of that contributed into coaching. So even if you feel like you're not doing something you love now, focus on the skill you're developing because that skill is going to get like just in a relay how you pass the baton, that skill is going to get passed on to the next job, to the next job, until you come to a place where you really love and you have all the skills you need to become successful at it.
Actually, now I realize why I lost the championship. I didn't know how to dance.
There you go,
So,
Saveen. There you go. That's the competitive advantage I had.
but it's really interesting. So for me, it was theater, like how it was dance for you. So every time somebody asks me a question about how do you handle this, what do you do
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
there is so much failure that, like you said, the iteration that I went through in theater. There was a time when I performed for 6 people in
Yeah.
a room where there were 180 chairs empty.
Yeah.
And there was a time when somebody threw a chair at me on stage.
Right.
So today, when I go onto a stage, I'm like, okay, that I've been through a lot more. So
Yeah.
this can't be so bad.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of learning there. But when I recommend this to leaders to step out of their comfort zone in the journey that they come with us on storytelling and so on, there's a lot of resistance to leave what they've done and step out, and you called it going back to zero.
Yeah, going back to zero. And
Yeah.
so I mean that's because they don't have a compelling reason.
Yeah.
Right. And I use the word compelling. And I'll paraphrase this again. A compelling reason comes from pain. Very simple. It doesn't come from anything else. So if you don't have a reason, it's because you haven't felt the pain. And this is why I'm very selective of the people that I work with. My first question to them is not what is your desire, what's hurting? Right? What's hurting? Because unless the hurt is there, you're not going to step out of your comfort zone. Right? You're not going to step out of and start growing. Right? Now, coming back to what you talked about, failure is not only learning, right? Failure, it builds endurance. A lot of people don't get this point that success is rented. You can battle for 50 years of your life, right? Come to a level of success. Let's imagine that as a couple of $1 million in your bank. But listen, that's rented. It's not permanent, right? Soon as you start shining, there'll be people to take you down, different level of enemies, different self of haters, competitions creeping up. And just like how you can only be at the summit of Mount Everest for a couple of minutes before you freeze to death, success also has a shelf life. How do you prolong this success so you can soak in the view? Comes from the endurance that you have gone through in failure. Otherwise, you'll just be like a match. When you strike a match, it
It's a moment.
it bright bursts and it dies. That's how it's going to be.
Okay. So observation versus articulation versus internalization. What's the driving factor?
The driving factor is intention, right? I think at the base of observation, the three things that you talked about, right?
Articulation, yeah.
Observation, articulation, and
Internalization.
internalization comes this intention, right? It's what Simon Sinek says. What's your why, right? If that's not strong, you won't go through this process.
Yeah. It's a lot of work in all three dimensions.
Yeah, right. And for someone with the intention, it's not work.
Yeah.
It only becomes work if you don't have an intention.
Perfect. What was that point in your career when you knew that this is what you want to do?
When I started enjoying the stage, right? When I started enjoying, when I started um, building an appetite to being in front of an audience. It's one of the few moments in my life where I'm fully present. Like when I'm speaking on stage, I'm 100% there. When I get off the stage, I'm thinking about the past or I'm thinking about the future. I'm aloof all the time. You ask my wife, she has to knock on my head to see whether Dananjaya is there. Right? My mind is always wandering. But when I get on stage, I'm there 100%.
Yeah, I think that's how I describe it to myself as well. Incidentally, that it's the same feeling. So, yeah, this is something that I have seen, but I'll still read the question, right? So, once you've delivered your speech, did you feel the sense of accomplishment, irrespective of the result?
Funny feeling. I think when I won the World Championship of Public Speaking, it was more anticlimactic. Climatic was delivering the speech. Anticlimactic was winning. And it's because it marked the end of a journey.
Mm.
Right. So you had the you monster there, you killed the monster now, right? You climbed the mountain, right? And you think you should feel elated, exhilarated, but you now have this, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Now what? Right? Um so I felt a great sense of presence when I was delivering. The victory created the road to a new journey, a new mountain.
So, okay. We understand mentors play a big role in our lives. So, how do we choose mentors?
I think the mentor chooses you. You know, I think your job is to make yourself visible. Like what I did was when I was young, I joined Toastmasters when I was in 19, 20. I just spoke, right? And there was Arunasalam Balraj, one of my mentors in the audience, who just felt like, look, I need to coach this kid. So it's not about finding a mentor. It's about creating visibility to your work.
Yeah.
So you may be an artist, you may be a musician, you may be in theater, right? You may be a serial entrepreneur. Make your work visible, and the person that's supposed to mentor you will come to you. As the very old Chinese adage, right? That when the student is ready, the master will appear. It's
Yeah.
very true.
Making yourself worthy enough to find that mentor. Is that?
I don't think worthy is the right word. I think creating visibility is the right word.
Mm.
Right. So what do you mean by visibility? It's not visibility to yourself. It's visibility to your work.
Mm.
Say you like poetry, right? Is your poetry out there in the world today? You like writing short stories. Get your short stories out in the world today, right? Go speak in not only in Toastmasters but different clubs that are there, right, around the world. Show people that you're constantly building a body of work, however small it is, and then you will see that the mentors will come to you. Them coming to you is a sense of your worth.
In the course of your world championship journey, if given a chance, what would you do differently?
I wouldn't do anything differently. I've had an incredible journey, Saveen. I have no regrets in life. If I die tomorrow, I would die with a smile. Like I have no regrets, and that's how I know I'm there, right? I have my version of success. I have, you know, I'm one of my friends always tell me this, like, Dananjaya, you're on bonus time, and I'm on bonus time. I've achieved everything I want to achieve in life. I've been the master of my craft. I have three beautiful children, a lovely wife that I've loved for 18 years. I met her in high school, and I've made this little corner in my universe that's very fulfilling, right? So for me, there's nothing to change. And the most glorious part of my journey is that I've had the fortune of associating some tremendous people. These are the mentors that I work with, right? And that's my greatest treasure, right? Is the pure joy of being surrounded by a group of people that the new generation will never associate. They're gone. Your generation, like our generation, was the last to bridge the old generation with the new,
Mm.
right? And I think I was fortunate enough to get a little bit of that, and it's made me a very happy man. So I wouldn't change anything.
Awesome. So, do you think the person needs to be a narcissist to be successful?
Do you have to be narcissistic to be successful in
Yeah.
today's world? I would say yes. I would say that in the generations to come, um, and this goes back to what I talked about. Honest people, people with integrity, people with values will not be successful. And this is why I constantly teach my kids a new story of success. I'm not telling them, about money. I'm not telling them about cars, clothes, whatever you and I grew up with,
Mm.
right? Because if they have to get there, they'll have to do some pretty bad things, right? So if you are an honest person, the likelihood of you achieving material success in the next 20 to 50 years is very slim. Very slim. So to answer that question, it will be yes. So the world needs a different narrative of success. For those who don't want to be narcissists, sociopaths, they need a different narrative, and people are struggling for that narrative. Savit, right? So people who don't want to be cutthroat, people who don't want to be politically manipulative, they are struggling for a new story that helps them feel successful. And that's why leaders like you and me and a lot of people who are in this field need to come and say, look, it's okay, right? Here's a new story. And it's okay to believe in this story that'll allow you to be a good human being and live a good life that's successful, but not go to any of the extremes.
Yeah, that's very thought provoking. And just to add on that, there is hope that we can make a name and define the success parameters for ourselves. That
I think for individuals, yes. As a collective society, it's questionable.
yeah,
So I think there's still salvation for good people, but you won't be filthy rich, right? But you could still be the best at what you do,
yeah,
right? You could still be the best at what you do. You could still be the best, but I don't see material success coming to honest people anymore.
that's great. Any on final thoughts, right? Anything that you want to share that will serve as a guiding path to people who constantly lose motivation because of maybe a small failure, or like we constantly look for motivation outside. So how do you find that inside?
Um, Look, if it was one piece of advice that I would love to give everybody listening to this podcast, right, is live a life of no regrets. Let's forget the motivation, right? Let's forget the inspiration. Just ask yourself, right? If your life ended tomorrow, would you have regrets? And what that regret could be not eating a certain type of ice cream in a shop. It could be not going after your love of your life. It's important to understand this little time we have on this planet Earth, which is an extremely small amount of time, right? Um, you should not have any regrets. Even if you fail, failure doesn't lead to regret. Not trying leads to regret.
Yeah,
So forget the result, try, right? Just try. And try 100,000 times the 100,000 things you want to do. Forget the result. And you'll be a very happy person.
fantastic. All right, thank you so much, Dhananjay. This was really a very, very deep conversation, a lot of learning, and thank you for your time. And this was great.
Thank you for having me, Savi.
Thank you.
Pleasure
Thank
being
you.
here with you.
Great.